Welcome to In the News for March the 10th, 2023. I am Brett Burney from appsinlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Hi, Jeff. Good morning. Good to be back with you. I feel like I'm not traveling this week, so it's like
Always
I
nice.
feel good to be back in the homestead here, which is a good thing. But wow, some interesting announcements this past week that you did a good job on reporting. This first one is Apple Music Classical, and I got to tell you, I don't know that I would have been as excited about this, except for the fact that over the last couple of, several months or so, I've been exploring a little bit more in the Apple Music app. And of course, there's all kinds of genres, right? You can do rock and pop and jazz. And I love the spatial audio in jazz because you can listen to it and it sounds like, you're sitting on the stage around with jazz artists. And I love that. But I've been starting to listen a little bit more to some of the classical albums that they put in the Apple Music app, Jeff, looking specifically for those recorded or tweaked for spatial audio. And it's been wonderful and lovely. Now, I knew, as you reported a few years ago, Apple acquired this company called Prime Phonic. And I've heard people talking about, like, when is Apple going to do something about this? Well, now they have the answer this past week, and you reported on it.
Yeah, so by the end of this month, we'll have a brand new app called Apple Music Classical. You can even go and pre-download it now, which is something I don't see very often.
I did that.
You go to the App Store and you click Get, but you don't actually get something yet. It just basically says, okay, it'll be automatically downloaded to your phone when it comes out in a few weeks. But there is something different about classical music than other types of music because although you think about something like who wrote the music, like Mozart or Bach or something, people are far more interested in who did the solo on it or who was the composer, who was the conductor. And so you want to have different search mechanisms like that. You also want songs to flow one from the other without breaks between the songs. There are some different things about classical music. I'm not a huge classical music person, but I do like it sometimes. I'm remembering that when I first got back in the 1980s, when I got my first CD player as I was just starting college, I remember I bought, you had to pick out your CDs, and I remember getting different artists that I liked at the time. But one of the things I remember getting, and it was because it was so cheap. You got 10 CDs for very inexpensive, or the class, the best classical music. And it was nice to have some classical music because at the time a CD player just seemed like the quality was so much farther beyond like a tape player or a record player, but also because for just background music, if I was doing at the time, writing a paper in college, or now just writing a brief through my legal practice, I like classical music or soundtracks for movies. Sometimes those things without words is just something in the background to listen to. So, although I'm not going to be a huge user of this, I absolutely will use it. And like you said, Apple has already been improving its classical music selection by spatial audio and stuff. So I think it's going to be great. And for people that are really into classical music, this will be fantastic. I mean, it's people used to love Prime Phonic, and it took Apple over a year to figure out what to do with it. But I'm really hopeful that in a few weeks when this comes out, this will be something really special. So anyone out there that enjoys classical music, if you're not currently subscribing to Apple Music, this might be a time to try a subscription for a month or two and see what you think.
I never used Prime Phonic, but I've heard several people talk about it, and exactly what you were saying. I remember when I started importing my CDs into iTunes, I needed some additional fields to be able to properly track and search my classical music, right? You've got a rock song, right? You can do, Metallica, the name of the album, and it's like, that's sometimes pretty much all you need, or the names of the songs, right? But with classical music, not only is it just exactly what you were saying, the different conductors, the different symphonies, the different orchestras, the different soloists, there's different genres, subgenres inside classical. And it's a weird naming convention a lot of times, depending on the classical piece that you're talking about, which doesn't really fit, the traditional song naming conventions that most of us like. Anyway, to your point, it's just great. And so, yes, I see the reason now that we need sort of a separate music app, although at first I was like, why not just incorporate it all into the same thing? But I get it. I understand that, and I'm pretty excited about that as well. Apparently, it's only going to be available on the iPhone initially. You linked to a story here from MacRumors where 15 things you need to know about the Apple Music Classical app. Not available for the iPad, at least not initially here. And there was a couple of other things in here. It is going to be spatial audio, which I'm very excited to try on there. No radio capability in there yet, and some limitations they were talking about here, like you can't, it's not going to be like the color of the album cover, behind. It's just going to be a white background type of a thing. But anyway, I'm excited. I'm truly excited, and I know there's a lot of people out there that are looking forward to this on this as well. The other piece of news that came out this week, which I didn't see coming. You kind of did, though. I know you kind of keep up with this, but one of my favorite colors is yellow, Jeff. I don't know if you knew that. Just in case you didn't know. If you couldn't tell from my background. If you couldn't tell from my background. So I was gleeful this past week when Apple all of a sudden, at least to me, announced a brand new color for the Apple iPhone 14 in yellow. It's like sunshine yellow or canary yellow. I don't know exactly what kind of yellow that it is, but it's very yellow.
Canary yellow seems like a pretty good description of it. It's a bold color. It's nice, but why not have some color? Right. Couple things about this. First of all, it's only for the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus, not the Pro models.
No Pro.
Apple seems to think Apple does not like giving fun colors for Pro models. I guess Pro users are way too serious. You can basically have, black, silver, or something that's between black and silver. That's pretty much.
I got the gold. They call it gold, but it looks kind of white.
Well, you're really being crazy with your gold.
I'm pushing the boundary, Jeff.
You are. Pros are not supposed to have fun with the colors of their phone, Brett. You should know that. But Apple does have some nice colors, and it's interesting that they do this because the Apple iPhone for the last couple of years, they have the new models released in the fall, and they usually have 4 or 5 different colors. And then this is the 3rd year in a row that in the spring, here we are in March, Apple releases a new color. And I guess it's a way for Apple to sort of refresh the line. By March, they probably know which colors are selling better than others. So for example, if nobody was buying the purple this year or something like that, they could probably say, okay, well, let's make half as many purples as we had been. And we'll use that extra capacity to try something new with yellow. I don't know why Apple does it, but they seem to do it, year after year. In fact, this is the 3rd year they've done it. When they did it in 2021, the new color they came out with was purple. When they did it last year, the new color they came out with was green.
That's right.
And this year it is yellow. So let's think of those 3 colors together. Purple, green, and yellow. Sort of a gold. Purple, green, and gold.
I wonder what that looks like.
And gold. It's Mardi Gras colors. So that's my conspiracy theory. So now that they've completed the trifecta, I don't know if they'll do it again next spring. And if they do, it will mess up my theory that this all has to do with New Orleans. But anyway, so that's
it's all for you, Jeff.
I appreciate that.
You also linked to a really neat video from Jason Snell, one of our favorites. We're at SixColors. I didn't know that he did some of these like live unboxings, but he literally, he's all dressed in yellow. He even compares it to a tennis ball in the Yellow Barrel of Monkeys game. I love this. Anyway, if you're interested, Jeff linked to Jeff's Jason Snell's very short little video here, but it's just neat to kind of see the unboxing. No, you know what? It adds to your theory, Jeff, because Jason got the yellow iPhone from Apple, and they sent him a purple iPhone case.
There you go. Purple and yellow do look good together.
He just needs some green.
Yeah. Well, this is a good transition that it's not just the new yellow iPhone. Every spring for the last couple of years, Apple, has their new collection, so to speak. And so they have new iPhone cases, they have new Apple Watch bands. And as I pointed out in my post today, Apple Watch bands in particular, Apple releases them. And then although there are some classics like the Milanese, which they've kept around for a very long time, many times, if you really like a color of a band and you don't buy it during the 6-month period that it's around, it's gone.
Right.
I knew this, and I learned this. I've mentioned this in the past. I had like a green one that I really liked, and it ended up breaking. And when I went to replace it, they no longer sold the same color green. It was a slightly different green, but it was fine. But I really preferred the original green to the new green. So, but then the flip side is, if you don't like the current color offerings, just wait a couple of months, and Apple will refresh the line with some new. But it's they definitely update these colors and definitely do it every spring.
Yeah, you linked to another story quickly here on iMore about, if you already got an iPhone 14 and you're happy with your color, maybe you still want a little bit of a different color splash. There's some new Apple Watch color bands. Right. These were actually pretty good. The sports band, the solo loop on here. It seemed like there was something else that they released. Oh, like you said, the cases on there, which is really neat. So
and if you want the high end bands from Hermes, they have some really gorgeous new colors. I mean, they're expensive, but there's some really nice ones that they came out with this spring.
Well, if you bought an iPhone in 2022, maybe you got an iPhone 14. You did not get a canary yellow iPhone. That just came out last week. I don't think they're even shipping quite yet. But this was a really interesting story in 9 to 5 Mac that you linked to about the best selling smartphones for 2022. And I got to tell you, when I first looked at this list, Jeff, I thought, okay, is this just in the United States? Is it global? But some really interesting numbers here.
In fact, now that you've said that, it comes from a company called Counterpart Research. And we should say that Counterpoint Research, we should say that whenever companies predict, well, that's the key word, is predict. Whenever these companies announce what the number one, what the number two phone is, the number three is, they don't really know for sure because Apple is not sharing that information. And I don't believe that Samsung or the other manufacturers, Google, are as well. So all that they can really do is guess based upon, their surveys, and they're looking at the sales numbers. But what Counterpoint Research did is they looked, this is global, this is worldwide, and they've come up with their estimate of what the top phones are of the year. So they say that the number one phone of last year was the iPhone 13, which that makes some sense to me because for most of 2022, that was one of the top iPhones, right? That was not the Pro model, that was the regular model. And until the 14 came out in late fall, that was the one to get. The number two phone, by the way, was the iPhone 13 Pro Max. People seem to like, if you're going to go Pro, a lot of people say, let's go Pro and go bigger. And so that makes sense to me that, those are the phones that were around most of the year. And then near the end of the year, for the last 6 weeks or so, you could get the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And of course, those shows up. So when I look at the list, from an iPhone perspective, it makes sense to me that these were the top phones last year. But, the interesting thing that I pointed out in my post was of these 10 that they list, there's only 2 that are not iPhones.
I know.
Both of them come from Samsung. And that doesn't surprise me because Samsung is so popular. But both of them were lower end Samsung phones. I know that there are people that buy the high end Samsung phones with the latest bells and whistles. But I guess if these numbers are to be believed, they are not. People are buying them, but only a very small percentage of people are buying them. Most people are just around the world are just getting an iPhone, and the Android is really mostly for if you want something really cheap. You can literally buy the Galaxy A03. The retail for it is what did I say on here? $120, something like that. But $160. But I know that you can actually get it for like $50. Like if you sign up with the carrier, you can get that A06 for 50. So, I mean, it's basic all but the free phones essentially. And if you want something cheap for a teenager that they're going to break or something like that, that's fine. Of course, most teenagers want all the bells and whistles of an iPhone. So that's just, it's interesting to me that Apple is so dominating, especially in the high end space. One of the reasons that Apple is one of the most or maybe the most profitable company in the world.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I asked about this, because I keep hearing this over and over. Maybe I should have researched this just to double check on what I'm trying to say here. But I know in the United States, the iPhones have always dominated, right? But in the rest of the world, I've always heard it's almost the opposite. Like general Android-based phones, wherever they come from, Samsung or Google, Android-based phones are way more popular than in the rest of the world. And so that's why I was kind of looking at this and like, is this correct? Like, could it really be that 8 out of the top 10 phones, at least based on their research here, are iPhones? And like you said, they do go from a global standpoint here. And I think I have an answer for that. Interesting.
I've also seen studies that say that if you look at across the entire collection, there are more Android phones sold worldwide than iPhones. But from the Android world, there are bajillions of different types, right? Samsung sells a ton.
That's right.
In fact, Samsung is infamous for this. They'll come out with 20 different models, not even knowing which one's going to be hit. And then whichever one people buy, that's the one that's the hit. And it's not just, and as it's not just Samsung. There's many, many other companies that either have licensed or unlicensed Android phones around the world. And so if you add all of those up, that's a ton of Android phones. But when you look at specific models of phone, Apple never really sells that many different models at one time. And so those will be near the top. Whereas for the Android side, yes, in total, it's over 50%. But for each individual line of Android, no one specific type of Android phone has so much market share. I mean, if you believe the numbers right here, the number one that they have, the Samsung
Excellent
A13 point. Is what,
right.
1.6%.
Right.
So
right.
every other Android phone that's popular is basically less than 1% for that particular model.
Excellent. Well, good news for our listeners in Luxembourg. If you have an iPhone 14 and you're waiting for the iPhone 14's Emergency SOS satellite feature, it's coming soon. So I always like this, and I know this is almost like kind of quasi old news, like, okay, there's more countries coming on board, it's already available in the US and Canada, France, Germany, etc. But I always like to just remind folks that this is a feature that is available in the iPhone 14, because more and more, we've already reported on several stories that if you're out somewhere or you don't have the best cellular service, but you have an emergency, just please know and recall that if you have an iPhone 14, that's the only phone right now that it'll work with, that you can still enable an emergency SOS via satellite. And it's really nifty how it works. It just asks a few questions, because you can't really have a phone call through the satellite, at least not right now, not yet, but it does enable you to send some questions and ask for some help, and they can sort of pinpoint where you're located at.
Yeah. Last summer, my wife and I went to Italy, which was an incredible vacation. It was unfortunately cut short because one of my kids got COVID in summer camp, so we had to leave early. But while we were there, we loved it. And as soon as we left, we said, we are coming back. And I'm glad to know that whenever I go back to Italy, if I'm off the beaten path, I can still, next time at least, I'll be able to have the protection of the satellites in Italy, Luxembourg, Belgium, Austria, the Netherlands, and Portugal.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Well, we talked about Android just a little bit a minute ago. And if you're an Android user, you already know about probably the magic eraser in Google Photos. Or actually, I guess this is in the Pixel phone, right? Google Photos has a magic eraser, which some people would just call it the erase in a photobomber, right? I've never used it yet. I know in your post you talked about that you attempted to use it. But I've seen other people talk about this, because there's some other apps that will do this, right? You've got somebody in a picture that you don't want in the picture. And so this, quote, magic eraser just allows you to like circle them on the picture, and they magically get erased out of the picture. Did it start working for you yet, Jeff, when you were trying it out?
It hasn't. It's a good feature, though. I mean, we've all had that situation where, like, you're at the beach and you're taking pictures of your friends, your loved ones, and then you didn't even notice it. But there's this one guy walking on the beach in the background, wearing his Speedo. You're like, I don't need you in the picture. I want you out of the picture. Let's just replace you with some sand and some water. And so it's a nice feature. And Google, to its credit, I mean, we talked about, Google Android versus iPhone earlier. Right, but when it comes to like some of this AI stuff, Google is on top of their stuff. They do a great job with it. Yeah. And the demos that I've seen of this on the Pixel phone, in fact, I think it was a Super Bowl commercial this year, it works really well. But now it's not exclusive to the Pixel phone. If you use Google Photos on the iPhone, you're supposed to have this feature. Now, I tried it again this morning and it's still not showing up for me. I'm not sure what I have to do to turn it on. I do know that you need to subscribe to Google Photos, which Google the lowest plan is called is like $2 a month or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm not a subscriber, but the app says that even if you're not a subscriber, you should be able to use the feature. You just can't save the photos without paying the money. Maybe I need to do it. I will say this, though, even though it's not working for me yet, I was glad that this encouraged me to put Google Photos on my phone again, because there's a lot of cool things you can do with the Google Photos app.
Yeah.
For one thing, they are, how Apple, I love the fact that the newest iPhones and the newest iPhone Photos app, if you take a picture and it's got any text at all in there, it can read the text. You can search for things with the text. But Google's had this feature for a very long time. And it's not just text. I mean, I was looking at a photo last night using Google Photos. And if you go into, I forget the name of the actual feature, but if you go into Google Lens, I think it's called Google Lens. If you go into Google Lens at the bottom, and then if I just tap on like a shirt, it will find pretty much that same shirt on Amazon or some other services and say, would you like to buy that shirt? And I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And likewise for objects, you can tap on them and you can instantly try to bind them. for words. I mean, it's pretty sophisticated and pretty deep stuff that they do with AI. And although I don't want to use it all the time, just the idea that it works at all is really neat. So if you haven't downloaded the Google and tried the Google Photos apps in a while, it's a free app to try. You don't have to, you have to pay money if you want to save pictures, but just to see all the interesting features they have in there, it's pretty cutting edge stuff. So, and Google, especially on these types of AI thing, I mean, they've been very good at removing, background from photos. I do that on myself, but when I have to do it, I typically don't use my iPhone or my iPad. I typically use my Mac with Photoshop because Photoshop does a good job. But of course, Photoshop costs hundreds of dollars to do these same features that you can do instantly on a phone. So, anyway, it's interesting that Google decided to bring this feature to iPhone users. Hopefully it'll work for me soon. And check out the Google Photos app. It's
that's the clarification. Like again, Android users, especially Pixel users, are like, oh, we've been doing this forever, right? But the story here, at least that you linked to from Tom's guide, is that now in the Google Photos app on the iPhone and iOS is going to be able to do this as well. So we've seen several of these features like that, like, that, hey, we've been doing this on Android world for many, many years. And it's like, okay, you iPhone users, finally you're going to catch up. But, quickly, just the thing, I got rid of my Google Photos app a long time ago, Jeff, just similar to what you were saying, because, I've got iCloud photos, obviously, but I've recommended it to some folks before when, their photos are filling up their iPhone, right? And they get that message like your memory is full. And sometimes I'll just tell them, well, just you could just get a Google Photos. I mean, you could pay for iCloud storage, but if they just want to get Google Photos, it'll basically synchronize or make a copy of your photos up into, the Google Photos so you can access them everywhere. And if you pay for the Google One subscription, just like you were saying, you can have some additional space on there. But just like you're saying, I'm looking at this press release now from Google, and you're right, there's some really cool things. We're talking about the Magic Eraser component on here, but they've got a collage editor. I've used several different apps to like create a quick collage of 2 or 3 different pictures, and if that's built in, plus I don't know if I would use this very much, but they have free shipping on print orders. I know you've used some other apps to do that, to create print books or coffee table books out of your pictures, but that's good. I might try this again and just see what I can do with the Google Photos app on there, including hopefully using the Magic Eraser. If you want to live in the future a little bit, here's a great little Apple Watch tip. Thank you for sharing this today from iDownload blog. I remember, I think you even mentioned this in your post here. My dad, when he had his old, quartz watch, right? He would set the minute hand just a little bit ahead, 2 or 3 minutes ahead, right? Because that to be early is to be on time, right? That's what they always drilled into my head. But on an Apple Watch is just getting the actual correct time, and it's just showing the correct time at all times. But there is a way, thanks to you for sharing this, Jeff, that you can set your Apple Watch ahead just by a few minutes. This was a great tip.
Yeah. And that's really all there is to the tip. It's, if you like the idea of being 5 minutes ahead or 2 minutes ahead or 1 minute ahead, didn't even occur to me that you could do that. Ever since I remember in the days before, really the iPhone, you never really knew exactly what time it was. Every clock was a little different. But nowadays we have these devices that are connected to the world, and they're all 100% precise. And, the very second that it turns 9 a.m. on your watch and your phone, pretty much everybody else is turning 9 a.m. too. But it's nice to remember that if you still want to live ahead a little bit and sort of fake yourself out, nothing wrong with that. You can help your Apple Watch can help you do it. Makes sense.
I had no idea you could do this. So thank you, Ankur Thakur from iDownload blog. And he does a very good job of showing, like, even though you might change it on the actual watch face itself, like it might be 2 or 3 minutes ahead or whatever you want to set it. This is on this in the settings. It doesn't change the time for the other apps, right? In other words,
I'm seeing that. I did not even realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just love the way he points this out in there, which is okay, because most of the time you're going to be on your watch app anyway, right? Your face, your watch face, and you're going to be seeing that. But if you jump to a different app or so, it is going to show, the actual time on there. But just really neat that we still have that capability if you did want to set that up on your Apple Watch. Here's another HomeKit story. I like this one because, I don't know, this one just caught my eye. It's a company called Level, and this is a product called Lock Plus. We've talked about HomeKit-enabled door locks in the past, Jeff, but this one looks pretty cool. Plus, it works with NFC on your iPhone.
This is the one that I want to get, and we can't because I've mentioned this in the past. I have an old house, and my door sticks, and it doesn't always get lined up. But if you have a nice, like a newer house, your door perfectly opens and closes. This is the one that I really think is the one to get, and here's why.
Okay.
First of all, it works with HomeKit, so it's good for the Apple users. Second of all, it works with your existing deadbolt, so you don't have to get like a new faceplate or anything like that.
Right,
Just take your current deadbolt and remove it, and this fits within the exact same space. So
nice.
it doesn't, really change the way that things look. And then third of all, it works. This is important. It works with the home key feature of Apple, which is that nice new feature that when you approach your door, you could just put your watch close to the door without having to open an app or anything like that. And it will just, know that your watch is there. Or you could, if you have and it's got to be an Apple Watch, of course, or your iPhone, just put your iPhone close to the door and it will unlock. Now you can also unlock the door using the app if you want to do that, or if you want to give a guest the ability to unlock your door for a day while they're staying over. And you can also buy these NFC cards, which is just what it sounds like, just a card with an NFC chip to unlock it. So this product includes tons of different ways to allow it to work, but most importantly, it has the home key feature, which I think people would probably use most of the time. And it's a really nice product. So I wish I could use it. It gets rave reviews. This is the one that I would buy if I was in the market.
I feel like you should just replace your door just so that you can get this door. I mean, it looks really cool. Seriously, this is probably one of the first ones that I've looked at, and this review was excellent here from Bradley Chambers at 9 to 5 Mac. I thought he does a great job of being thorough and talking about it just exactly what you said. Even has like a little video in here too, which is great. Well, we're going to come full circle here. We started off talking about classical music. And I am so thankful that you shared this little video from apparently a composer by the name of Tony Ann. We'll have his or her YouTube channel linked, but I don't want to play it because I don't want to get taken down by the YouTube regime. But this is really cool. You're going to recognize it. Yeah.
Do you have your iPhone next to you that you could put it up to next to your thing? So
I do. Of course I do.
Let's remind people. So go to change ringtones. Of course, you go into your settings on your iPhone. You go into sounds and you go into your ringtones. And there's going to be a set of about 15 ringtones, which are the new ones. And then near the bottom, there's a option that says something like was it traditional or original, classic. So if you click on classic, so let's just walk people through memory lane. When the iPhone first came out in 2007, for the next 5 years, up until iOS 6, which was in the fall of 2012, for the first 5 years, the original iPhone ringtone was marimba. You want to play a little?
There it is. Yeah.
Play it for a second. Let's let people hear that one.
Let's see if I got it. I may have. Okay, I'm going to turn off my do not disturb.
Oh, you have to make that you can play.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it up a little bit on this. Let's see.
We all know that sound.
We know it. In fact, I think I still have nightmares not nightmares, but it's like if I'm in a restaurant and I remember hearing that, and like everybody stops eating. Like, is that my phone? Is that your phone? Whose phone is that?
Because people never changed the default ringtone.
Right.
So that was the default ringtone for 5 years. Wow. So then starting in the fall of 2012, and up into when the iPhone 10 came out, Apple changed the default from marimba to one that was called opening. And if you can still see opening, it's not in the classic, it's in the regular list.
Okay. Here it is.
Tap on opening.
Oh man.
We all know that one.
We all know that one.
That song, which for 5 years was the default ringtone.
Okay.
That is the one that that Tony Ann put together a little ballad, and it's worth listening to. He did a really nice job.
It's so great.
Turning that into.
I love it.
And then the current one, like ever since I think they started around fall 2017, they have had a new default ringtone. It's called Reflections. You probably see that at the very top of your little list there.
Yeah, it says the default. Here we go.
Right. So that's the current. So for those people who have never changed the default ringtone, and I have to admit, I usually stick with the default ringtone. If you've been using the iPhone since the beginning, you've gone through those 3 ringtones.
Yeah.
And as you said, Brett, you know them very well. All of those are killer. But it's now been over 5 years since Apple has changed the default ringtone. The first one lasted for 5 years. The second one lasted for 5 years. We've now been over 5 years. So here's my point. I think Apple, it's time to have a new default ringtone. I don't know what it would be, but let's come up with something clever. Give some audio programmer, stick them in a room for a month and say, come up with your best ringtone. And I think we're ready for a new default ringtone. So that's my hope.
You need to get Tony Ann on it.
Maybe he should come up with one. Exactly.
It's the iPhone alarm as a piano ballad. And it's an excellent little piece. It's only like 2 minutes long, but it's so excellent. You hear it. He plays the original alarm, and then he just goes into like the various variations on here, which is really, really fun on there.
And if you're a piano geek like I am, at the top of the screen, he shows that he wrote the piano music for it out too. And I love being able to like follow the notes it's very cool. Follow the notes that are coming up and as he's playing them. He's an incredible piano player to be able to play that quickly and with that range across the entire keyboard. I love to play piano, but I'm just a simple piano player. People like this that are truly skilled have nothing but the respect for me.
In the know. In the know is it's funny. We landed on the same kind of a thought process. We have two tips that deal with the Overcast podcast app. And let me just say quickly, I know last week we talked a little bit about the fact I was at the ABA Tech Show conference, and folks were coming up and sharing, and just so kind. People were telling me how much they enjoyed listening to this podcast, and we are thankful for all of our listeners, no matter what podcast app, what pod capturing casting app that you're using. But we do know, not because we're, big brothering it, we do know from some of our stats that the vast majority of our listeners, Jeff, are using the Overcast podcast app, which I know that's our personal choice. I've been using the Overcast app for a long time. It is an excellent app. In fact, I remember just a couple of weeks ago in another podcast, I heard the developer, Marco Arment, where he was just talking about, he's a single individual business. He's been working on this for a long time. And so one of the things that I just wanted to share, just in case, if you are a listener to our podcast, and we thank you so much, that you could maybe just think about sharing the link or sharing our podcast with somebody else that could be interested in what we're doing. And if you enjoy it, we appreciate it. And just, sharing a little bit of the podcast love. But quickly, let me just show you, there are 3 ways that you could share the podcast inside the Overcast app. In fact, you're already in the Overcast app, and there's 3 quick ways here that Marco in the Overcast app allows you to do that. In the top right corner of whatever podcast you're listening to, whether it's our podcast or any other podcast, in the Overcast app, there's the share button, which is the square with the arrow pointing up. The first option is share link, and you could just tap share link, and you could send a link to the podcast to someone via text message or email, or share it on Twitter or Mastodon, whatever your choice of your social channels are these days. And all that does is generate a link that will open the podcast in a web browser for whoever you're sending the link to. Now, in that case, they have they start at the very beginning of the podcast. I realize sometimes maybe you don't want to impose on somebody to say, hey, this is a great podcast. I really enjoyed this tip, or the Apple Watch tip, for example. So instead of sending them the link to the entire podcast, the second option in Overcast is share link at current time. So the only difference there is, let's say that you really want to share the Apple Watch tip that Jeff and I just talked about with somebody else. Instead of just sharing the link to the entire podcast and telling them, they don't talk about this until, 20 minutes in or something like that. All you have to do is just go to that section or that place in the podcast and share link at current time, sends the link to your recipient. And when they click it, it opens in the web browser again, and it just starts playing at that place where your current the playhead was. So that's really cool. The third way, quickly, is really something innovative. Marco put this in looks like just a few years ago. You can share a podcast clip. So even better, if you go in and you say, here, I just want to share this Apple Watch tip that Jeff and Brett were talking about with, my mom or somebody like that, you can go in. When you tap share clip, it gives you the option to just share that specific clip. There's an end item that you can move. There's the start place that you can do, and you can start listening to it, and it just gets that little clip. And when you send that, you have the option of sending it as like an audio file, or you can send it as a video file. And so your recipient will just see this. And when they click on it, it just plays that little clip there. Or you can share it even out through social channels. I just had never really explored any of that, Jeff, but just because I had this great experience last week, with talking with folks, and I'm like, if all of you out there listening are already using the Overcast app and you just want to share quickly a little tip or a little section of something that Jeff and I are talking about, you can just tap that share link and that share item, and then you can share a link from the current playhead, or create just a tiny little clip. And it's very quickly, it doesn't spend a lot of time to do it. Share just that little clip with somebody. So that's my tip in using the Overcast app today.
It's a great tip, specifically because podcasts are difficult. If you see something interesting on a web page, you can say, go to this page and just search for the word, Canada, and then you'll quickly find what they were talking about on the web page.
Right.
But podcasts are tough because somebody doesn't, there's no universal search. This may be coming in the future, but there's no universal search of the words that are in a podcast. And so if you want to share like a brief little moment of a podcast with somebody, it can be really hard to do that. There was one just this week that I was going to share with somebody, Alan Alda, who, used to be on MASH, way back when. Mm-hmm. He has a podcast that he does every week. Yeah. And he was talking about Chat GPT, which we've all heard about in the news. It's, it generates text automatically. And he asked Chat GPT to create a MASH script for the, a brand new script in which his character, Hawkeye, and his friend, BJ Honeycutt, if I have the name correctly, go back and forth. And so he generated this script, which the computer made up. And then he got the, I'm forgetting the name of the actor who played BJ Honeycutt. And the two of them got on, they read it in the podcast. So like, if you wanted to share that podcast with somebody, you might not want to share the entire 30-minute podcast, but you might want to share just the 2 minutes where they are doing what's essentially a table read of a brand new MASH, and so that's a perfect example. With this app, you could find just that one part. Even nobody has to listen to the rest of the podcast, but just here's the part that you wanted to share with them, just those 2 minutes. So that's a great link, and there's not really a good way to do it in any other way except for what Overcast is doing. So bravo to Marco.
Thank you, Marco. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great tip. So my tip is also an Overcast tip, and I came at it from a different reason. So every once in a while, you will come across audio that you want to listen to. Earlier this week, for example, I wanted to listen to an oral argument before the United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, and you can go online and listen to those. But if I listen online, it's a little bit of a pain because all I can really do is start and stop. It's in real time. It's complicated if you want to go back and listen to something again. Plus, when I listen to audio, I enjoy using Overcast, which means that I can use the voice boost to improve the audio sound. I can use Smart Speed, which reduces the silences between words so that it's a little bit more compact. I want to listen to it not at 1.0 speed, but at like 1.5 speed to be a little bit faster. And so, and it's much easier to move around because I can just go back and forth on the little, to scrub through the recording. So that's the way that I want to listen to audio. So if you subscribe to Overcast is free, but there's a couple features you get for paying like $10 a year. And one of the features that you get is if you encounter audio from any source, whether it be like an education course that you have on audio, or if it's a recording of something, if you're listening to any sort of recording, my example, you can either upload the audio to the Overcast website, or you can just say, here is the URL for this audio clip. So I just copied and pasted the US Fifth Circuit website, the audio clip. And what it will do is it will turn that basically into a podcast, and it will automatically download it to your Overcast app on your iPhone. So you just sit there and let it do its thing for 15 seconds. And then when you look on your Overcast app, in addition to your regular podcasts, you will see the audio clip or the full audio recording that you sent down there. And it is just, like I said, it is so much better to listen to audio in an app that is made for listening to audio like Overcast. So this is the way that, it's not often that we find ourselves having to listen to something that's in an MP3 or some other audio format. But when it happens, my goodness, Overcast is the best way to do it. So that's my tip. Again, you have to subscribe. It's incredibly useful.
Yeah. And the subscription, I think, is it $10 a year or something like
I
that?
thought it was 10 a year. I don't know. Yeah, there you go. You can. So with the $10 a year, you have some other little advanced features that you can do if you want. I mean, the main reason that I pay $10 a year is just to support the developer. Because like you say, it's just one person who's spending a lot of time on this. And I want him to continue to develop the app. I want to encourage him to do so I can keep using the app year after year. And for me, I totally get $10 of value out of it just from listening to podcasts, let alone from the advanced features like providing my own audio.
But you're so right. I mean, I take it for granted now with my podcast, because this was one of the first features I think that Marco put in, is this smart speed and this voice boost. And I just love the fact, I mean, even with the smart speed is great if I want to listen to it at, in real time, but I'm typically, and I know you do the same thing, I will swap over quickly and, speed it up maybe to like, 1.4, 1.5 speed, or even sometimes, 2x speed sometimes if I'm focused on something. But it spoiled me though, Jeff, because anytime, exactly what you were just talking about, any other time that I have some kind of an audio that I'm listening to, I'm like, I can't stand it. Like I want to speed it up just a little bit. And now that I had no idea you could import audio into the Overcast FM site, but oh my goodness, I'm doing that. I am doing that. That is fantastic. Thank you. All right. So again, thanks all of you for listening, and we always appreciate the support there. And hopefully that was some good tips on Overcast as well. I think we're back to normal programming, Jeff. So we'll talk with you next week.
Sounds good, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.